Sounds like it's about to be recorded. That's good news because it's the ShadowCast, episode 1, season 3, I think, maybe season 4. But we got the commissioner, interim, the commissioner, Shadow, and the voice of the people here for you tonight, ShadowCast, episode 1. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. And it's funny, we're going into week 3, Alex and Dave. We waited on this a little bit, but I think it's a blessing in disguise because the takes would have been absurdly cold after week 1 for some of the teams we would have talked about, and the takes would have been extremely hot for some of the teams we were worried about. So now we get the lay of the land. And, just going into this, we started talking about what we're going to talk about, which teams we're going to focus on. But Dave, you brought up earlier, the parity in the league is something that we pride ourselves on every year, where the new champion can come and surprise someone. We had the Appalachia boys from back in the day, the Chafe Gentlemen, seems like eons ago, but the Chafe Gentlemen won at some point. And then, you have the Consistents, the Moist Towelettes, the playoff contender that never wins a playoff game. And then you have the tortured franchises, the Green Eggs and Hamos, been there twice, come up short twice. And then the House of Pancakes, who have put in the work, got that playoff win last year and just came a little short and is looking to make it happen this year and is looking pretty darn good, but we'll get into that. But Dave, just talk about the parity we're seeing so far, because it's pretty impressive once again what we have going.
Yeah, absolutely, Warren. I'm happy to be back with you boys. We have the trade moratorium for week 1. I think we have to have the podcast moratorium going forward for the first 2 weeks. I love this. I love that we have some actual takes. We have some insight into the league. And like you said, we have 3 teams at the top undefeated, 2 of which are here with me, none of which have scored 200 points, but that's neither here nor there. And then we have 6 teams at 1-1, 6 teams, myself included, and obviously 3 teams in the basement. You hate to see it, but all 6 teams at 1-1 have put on good showings, have scraped. I mean, look at Moist Towelette. Last week, he was the darling of the league. He beats Here Comes Trouble in a stunning comeback. But now, and then he comes back this week after a beautifully written game of the week, I might add. Amazing. And, he tanks it. Myself, I lost, a narrow battle with my dear friend Floppy Knockers. And then this week, I'll be the first to say I did not see my team putting up over 200 points. Do I love it? Yeah. Was I surprised? Also, yeah. And, I'll mention one more team before I kick it over to Al. Here Comes Trouble. I think this team is very strong. The fact he's 1-1 is a blessing to us all. Obviously, he has the Saquon Barkley question mark. But you look at that team, and there's plenty of guys on the bench who could probably start on some other teams. So love to see 6 teams at 1-1. And I think it's going to continue going forward.
Yeah, and we have, the surprises are here and there. I think, Alex, no one's more surprised than you and I to be at 2-0. Just talk about that for a second. You've been a team, you've been a franchise that starts out hot or starts out cold, and it looks like a hot start so far. And it's all because of the mistake man.
Yeah, I mean, 2-0, right where you want to be. I can think about the times when I was 0-2, 0-3, and just the day-to-day pressure that I feel like I'm not dealing with is palpable. So to not have to deal with that stress, feel like I can kind of sit back and let things come to me a little bit, that's huge, which being 2-0 allows. I think you look at those 3 teams at the top, they're all pretty solid squads, but they all have their deficiencies as well, I'd say. For me, it's, wide receivers are weak. Warren, running back, obviously the weakness, and John just doesn't really have much depth. So, to David's point, you look at those 6 1-1 teams in the middle, I think 4 of them would have higher points for than I. So if those teams were 2-0, they'd be in the top spot. We're just looking at, a week to week thing here where one of those teams can jump right into first place. So the parity's great. Love to see it tight at the beginning, and hopefully those guys towards the bottom can climb back in it.
Yeah, it's amazing when you look at the top, because you're right. There's, we can be honest about our teams. There are deficiencies, and that just gives those 1-1 teams that glimmer of hope that, especially with the points for in a moment's notice, after 1 week, 1 win, they'll be right up at the top as well. So that's going to be very interesting. Now, a place where I think I've been more often than not, and I'm very lucky to be 2-0 this year, but usually I have a sputtering start. Even when my teams are good and playoff teams, I sputter. And that's something that we've worked on consistently in the offseason to remedy, and it's happening, and it's good to see. But the 0-2 start is not a death sentence. Alex, you're right. There's a sense of pressure that you feel when you get the 0-2, even when you get the unlucky 0-2, or especially the holy crap, my team is garbage right now, 0-2. There is a glimmer of hope. One win turns it all around, and especially with the 1-1s that Dave was talking about, all of a sudden these teams could hop right up into that middle class and join it. Now, when you look at these 0-2 teams, you have Pat Jones, who lost in maybe the most insane Monday Night Football fashion 2 weeks ago that we've ever seen. And once again, that's why I'm not 1-1 right now. So you look at that team, and there are a lot of pieces to like. The wide receiver depth is very impressive. The running backs are studs on paper. We'll get into whether or not they can continue to be studs over the course of the season, due to some pests in the backfields. But you look at that team, and the panic meter can't be at 10 for Pat Jones. The 0-2 start, the numbers start to bend against you, but you can't be panicked. And then we turn right over to the Dark Knights, the reigning champs. I mean, this is a franchise that prides itself on digging themselves out of a hole. And this is not a hole they can't dig themselves out of. There will be, I think they're going to need to be some adjustments. Some injuries have hit them hard early on, and they are relying now on some unproven players or some lightly proven players to really make their play and get up there. Now they have a get right matchup. Just kidding, Alex. They have a matchup against the 2-0 Green Eggs and Hamos, and that's a league differentiator, that type of matchup, that 2-0, 0-2. Where a win by the 2-0 team to 3-0 and 0-3, all of a sudden you're looking back thinking, holy crap, because the other two 0-2 teams are playing each other, Pat Jones, and that's going to be a great matchup. So I think, lastly on Chafe Gentlemen, they're getting average to above average play from all their depth options. It's just Josh Allen and Alvin Kamara have decided to take a siesta for the first few weeks of the season. So I think of the panic meter, I'd like to ask you guys, which team would you has you panicking the most as a third party? Either you can pick panicking to say, wow, if they just get this right, they're moving up and they're going to be a legitimate threat. Or, geez, this is something they really got to monitor. They might need to do a shakeup, a la Alex with Le'Veon a few years ago, Bob with Christian last year, something like that. So Alex, what do you think? Where's either the concern for you as a contender or the concern for them as a wannabe threat?
Yeah, so I'll take it in the myself panicking view. Looking at Pat Jones's team, I think his QB and tight end situation are pretty weak, but running back and receiver, he's flush with talent. To the point where I could see him making a trade. Like the fact that I think he had Cortland Sutton on his bench this week, who scored like 26 points, and it really didn't make sense for him to plug Cortland Sutton in until after the fact. So he's got 4 or 5 good wide receivers. Mixon, everybody avoids him like the plague, but he looks like a great pick. If Zeke comes around, I'd say that's probably his biggest worry, is maybe Pollard takes the lead in that backfield. He looks like the better back through 2 weeks. But I would say that's a team that I fear out of the group that's 0-2, because I could see him making a trade that makes his team even stronger.
Yeah. Dave, what do you think? Do you think that the Chafe Gentlemen, it seems almost, I thought Alex was going to go with them because it almost seems like the safest bet that Alvin and Josh would start showing up. But are you concerned that Josh and Alvin both have not showed up yet? Because there is a difference in landscape, especially for Alvin Kamara. This is not the old Drew Brees Saints that we're seeing.
Absolutely. Warren, I'm not concerned about those two guys. Kamara did have 18 points in week 1. So, down week is bound to happen. Aaron Jones had 6 points week 1 for me. So, they can bounce back. At one point, I did want to make on Patman Jones in his week 1 loss to you, Warren. That was a league record in margin of victory or loss. 0.02 is the smallest ever.
Wow.
So I like that pick by Al. And, Chafed, it's a huge matchup this week, obviously. But overall, I like his starters. I think Mike Davis really is the swing man there, because Kamara's going to do what he's going to do. Smith-Schuster, I think, was one of the more underrated picks in the draft this year, especially if Deontay Johnson misses some time. I don't think Pat is down and out, but he needs to string together a few wins here, especially this week, if he wants to, right the ship and have a chance of making the playoffs.
Yeah, we're seeing the situation. I talked to the Chafe gentleman earlier today, and I said, if I told you that Juju was going to average 13, Terry was going to average 16, and Justin Jefferson was averaging 15 preseason first 2 weeks, you would have taken that to the bank and said, worst case 1-1. That's the situation that they find themselves in. And they're a good segue, I think, to one of our favorite segments over the last few years, the Yikes segment. This segment has spanned from self-depreciation to where we call Yikes on ourselves. We've done that a few times, to where we just take absolute pot shots at other league members and debilitate them and really strain friendships. That's a huge concern every single week that we take into account a little bit. But Dave, I think we start with you, because no one's a bigger critic of you than you. We know that about you. So I think the House of Pancakes deserve to have this moment in the sun, to get out of the shade, get out of the shadows, and talk a little bit. So the Yikes segment begins with the House of Pancakes and the interim commish.
Thank you, Warren. Yes, I'd like to take this time, sincerely apologize. I took on the interim commissioner role this year. It's a
big role. It's a big role.
A heavy burden, turns out. Didn't realize exactly what I was stepping into. But we are, at our core, a league of gates. And I'm going to give myself a yikes for causing the first gate this year. And that is IR gate, of course. Hand up. I fucked up. This is my sincere apology for forgetting to take off the IR spot in Yahoo. Also, my frustration with Yahoo for not letting me as commissioner change that before the game.
Now the blame's shifting here a little bit.
Hey, no blame. Blame is firmly on these shoulders. But I have a yikes. I got
your old company.
Atone. Thankfully, Yom Kippur just happened. I atoned for my sins. I fasted. But hand up, I thought I was doing what I could, announcing the second IR, staying active as the COVID spot. I understand the anger, the backlash that it caused. But I stand by my decision to split the vote that was 6-6 on the revote and keep the COVID spot.
Yeah, Dave,
it never should have happened in the first place.
Listen,
so I got
we all make mistakes, and I got to say, I gained more respect for you as commissioner when you doubled down like that. When you took the vote straight out of the Senate's hands, I said, you know what? I can go two ways on this. And I respect the hell out of you because it's a tough job. And Alex, you can speak to it. It's a tough friggin' job, man. It's not for the weak at heart. And I think, this next comment, this next yikes from Alex to this owner can't be weak of heart, because this is going to be pretty harsh.
Yeah. So for my yikes, we're going to look at the Chafe gentleman here. So we all know that front office over at Chafe HQ, they have their issues. The CFO, well documented embezzlement, corruption, Ponzi scheme type of guy. This time it was the COO that came around and really boofed a waiver wire transaction. So this is going back to week one, where it's right after the draft. It's 3 days after the draft. Very few moves are made at this time because not much happens between draft day and the actual season starting, save for like a major signing or a major injury. So Chafe decides to, have his scouting department stay up all night, pick up Chase McLaughlin at 3:09 in the morning on September 8th, and consequently use his waiver claim on that kicker. Wakes up the next morning, probably has a front office meeting, brings the COO in, brings the CFO in. You can only imagine the words those two exchange because, 5 hours after he's picked up, Chase McLaughlin is cut back on the block, and Chafe, essentially wasted that waiver claim for nothing. So I'm going to give my yikes to the infamous Chafe gentleman front office and C-suite of executives there.
Yeah, that's totally fair. And I think I'm going to stick with it with a yikes about Ramondre Stevenson. We're all Patriots fans here, maybe besides the Chafe gentleman who has chosen to go anti-Mac Jones this entire year. Bold move, and we'll see if it works out well for him. But it hasn't worked out well for Ramondre Stevenson. 5 touches in week 1, one of them being a fumble. And, we know about Bill Belichick and his penchant for benching guys that fumble. Damian Harris is kind of an exception because he is clearly that lead back, that bell cow. And you can't bench a guy that has that kind of talent. Ramondre Stevenson as a rookie, good Lord, he's all done. So you were kind of anticipating, at least I was with me holding on to JJ Taylor, was expecting Ramondre to be benched, and he was. And there was a glimmer of hope that was quickly extinguished with JJ Taylor, but Ramondre Stevenson's hope was out the window, and very likely, just like the COO of Chafe Gentleman, there has been no word on his whereabouts. That's something we might get to later on in the show, but that's something that they've held very close to the vest. Apparently a search is ongoing, but it's like in the death of Biggie Smalls, when the search is ongoing in a case, the evidence gets to stay private and not go public. So the case has not been closed. And I wonder if that's a situation. But I'll get out of the mud for Chase and just talk about Ramondre Stevenson. He's dust. There's no reason for him to be on a roster right now. And I don't know what the situation is at the headquarters, whether or not they like humiliating players and having them specifically wait until the waiver wire to get dropped for another player. But there's been a big thing for me is to drop players the second they don't have any use. And I think there's some sort of humiliation routine that the league may or may not want to look into at what's going on with Ramondre, because we'll talk about it in the mole segment, but there are some unhappy campers in that locker room, and Ramondre's one of them. And the welts, the bruises, the things that you just don't want to see are showing themselves, and it's a dangerous thing. So I'd say the yikes goes to Chafe once again. Sorry about that. They beat Pat Man Jones. Go get him, buddy. But good Lord, there has to be an organizational shift, because you started out with Josh Allen in round 9 and the expectations were so high, and all of a sudden the boofs just keep on coming. So there's got to be a shift. He made a Pinata Farms really admonishing his players, and that was disturbing to say the least. And we'll figure that out later, but it's a dangerous time for the Chafe gentlemen, and more importantly for their players. You just don't know what's going to happen. So we'll see.
And I would like to add just, I know we're dragging Chafe right now, but just want to shout out his Pinata Farms game. I almost hope he continues to lose, because it's generating just terrific content on League of Shadows Twitter. Pat, whatever you're doing, however you're finding these Pinata videos, keep doing it, man.
What are the chances the social media director over there gets promoted in the next few weeks? I think it's got that creativity should be used in the front office more often.
Yeah, his marketing department is the only person showing up to work.
They're crushing it. Absolutely. Yeah. They're showing up. They got the lunch pail. They're ready to roll, but everyone else
brick by brick
left behind. Now we're talking about left behind in a segment we'd like to call "Where Have You Been?" or "Where Have You Gone?" This is a segment where we talk about a few players on teams that you had high expectations for them, but they have not appeared yet. They have not shown up, and you're wondering, are you ever going to come home? Are you ever going to show up and produce again? This is an important segment for, I think, the 0-2 guys, but also the 1-1 guys that lost after the lofty expectations of week 1 that they produced. And I think the "Where'd You Go" segment has to go out for me to Moist Towelette in his entire tight end core. He's banking on the Patriots tight ends to bring him home. And I don't know if that's the right strategy or the wrong strategy, but they haven't brought him home yet. They haven't come home. And I'm wondering, is that the only thing that they have to worry about with a great rest of the team? Although Clyde Edwards-Helaire seems to be in a bit of an issue right now. But what's the situation with a bit of a, homeward bound situation where you have a guy that you just can't seem to get right? I think a prime example would be Will Fuller, who might have literally gone off the reservation and is not showing up. And Alex, you have a very defined stake in that fight where you have Jalen Waddle, and it seems like Jalen Waddle's ready to show up if Will Fuller's not. How are you monitoring that situation?
I think Fuller's coming back, or I at least read that he was like at the facility, so that'll be a blow to me. But hope everything's all right with Will. The obvious one for me is like if we're talking about missing in action, and it's big topic in the fantasy industry in general, but Dark Knights taking Ayuk in the 5th is just killer. Like he's not even playing, right? So it's like you swing and miss on a 5th round pick that's supposed to be your second wide receiver, third wide receiver, every week starter for you, especially when you take Kelsey in the 1st and you're playing catch up at those spots. That's going to hurt big time. So I don't know. Shanahan is a pain in San Francisco. Like anything he's doing, I just really don't want any part of, because it's almost like he's sticking it to us collectively. But yeah, I think that's big reason that Nico is 0-2, and be interesting to see what happens with Ayuk going forward.
Yeah, it's funny. He does mention it too in his pressers. He talks about fantasy and guys that fantasy. Newsflash, Kyle, it's not. This is what we live for. And the Dark Knights, it looked like from their social media account, there was a all hands meeting earlier today. It looked like they were in the bunker of a nuclear facility, really discussing Ernie Adams. I heard from the Dark Knights, Ernie Adams, the president of their organization. He retired recently from the Patriots to run TDK full time. And you got to wonder if it's a Dante Scarnecchia situation where he's retiring once again very soon, or, an Urban Meyer situation. Ran a great program for a bit, gave good advice, and says, man, I'm not cut out for this. So we'll see how it goes with the Dark Knights. I think the thing with Ayuk, what's wild is if you go to that draft list that they had where they took Ayuk, if you're looking at wide receiver, I don't know if there's anyone else. Judy looked great and then had that horrible injury, Alex, but another wide receiver in that realm that he would have taken besides Judy, I don't know. I don't think so. It's
a good point. I was going to take Ayuk if he was there for me. Yeah. So it's just the fantasy industry collectively, like everybody, I don't know. Logically, Ayuk was going to have a great season, so I'm not blaming 100%. Nico for that pick.
Right.
But just sucks the way it turned out for him, because he has one catch through 2 weeks, so he's basically.
I remember at the draft being pissed when Nico took him, because he was two picks before me, and I was targeting Ayuk in that round. So I mean, thank God I didn't get him. Yeah, but I agree. I think everyone thought he was going to be the darling of San Francisco, and now it looks like Deebo Samuel is that guy.
Yeah, and I mean, Dave, what do we have on your side? I think, if you look at these 1-1 teams, I'd say, not to give you one, but did you have higher expectations for Robbie Anderson as that keeper for Paula? Because I sure did. I had high expectations. I thought that was a great keep, great play, and now he's relegated to the bench. And I think it's a testament to Paula's team that he can bench him so quickly. But man, what a weird situation where all of a sudden it's now become just a DJ and Christian show in Carolina.
Yeah, I think we all thought the hookup with Sam Darnold, having played on the Jets together, was really going to come together, and finally give Darnold that guy he can throw downfield to, and it still might, but I agree. It looks like DJ Moore is going to be that guy. Obviously, CMC is essentially the entire offense in Carolina. But I actually not to jump around, but I wanted to look at Ra's al Ghul here,
Yeah.
another 1-on-1 team. You talk about drafting and how it can hurt you. Round 4, James Robinson, the Jaguars team as a whole looks like just a complete mess outside of Marvin Jones. Round 6, this is one where I really scratched my head. Kenny Golladay on the Giants. He was a question mark going into the draft. I thought, obviously a huge talent, got all the money in the world, but you saw on the sideline, he had some words for Daniel Jones, his quarterback. And that's really killing Bob, as well as, and I think this is another San Francisco player that we all thought was going to do well, Trey Sermon, who obviously has a concussion right now. We hope he feels better soon, gets healthy. But, Bob has a few guys here. Good team overall, I'd say. I thought Stafford was a steal in the 10th round. But he has a few guys who, if they don't show up soon, he might be looking to the waiver wire.
Yeah, he might be looking the wire, looking to a trade. And I think that dovetails perfectly in our next segment, Dave, that, you have to take off that commish hat and put on your GM hat every once in a while. And we have a new segment called GM Chatter, where we discuss a few little tidbits across the league of what people are thinking, where they're trying to move them. I have something that just came across the wire for me, right on my iPhone here. TDK trying to move Tony Jones hard.
Oh,
Got that from an undisclosed source, not LOS Woj, but from an actual front office that we may or may not have discussed earlier. And that's something that's very interesting. Where the first few trades happen, we've had a few blockbusters in the past in the early weeks, but typically it's these little dinky trades. No offense to anyone, Dave, you can go into it on your side, but these cuff trades, kind of securing your front, making sure you have everything on the back end set up. And I think that's a little bit of chatter that I'm hearing just now coming across. So that leads us into this segment. Dave, you have a little bit of chatter yourself that you were able to garner.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And, I'm always at the House of Pancakes open to trade talk. I think everyone in the league knows that. Al definitely knows that. We've been trade partners in the past. And this year I took an unusual strategy for myself. I loaded my bench up with a lot of handcuffs, but not my own handcuffs. Your handcuffs. And if you want your handcuff back, you come down to the House of Pancakes. Say, I don't know, your star running back you took in the first round tweaks his ankle week 2, and you need a guy named Alexander Madison. You come looking at my bench, and we'll have a talk.
I think
that goes for everyone on this.
Dave, that this is not a hostage negotiation. This is a friendly offer to barter. I think you're coming a little bit across as a kind of a hostage situation, where
all I'm saying is, you might need a running back, and I have 3 running backs on my bench.
Yeah.
Who are your handcuff? You know who you are.
No, it sounds you're a little gangster in you when you say, I don't know, something might happen. Something might happen to you that you just didn't want to have happen.
I don't know, Warren.
Just saying.
It might happen.
And you're right. It might happen. That's the nature of injuries, and we've had a few, but some more GM chatter. I think you've had a few. I've had a few. This morning I had a organization talk to me, and they said TDK says he's not concerned. He should be. He's about to go 0-3. And let's just say that's not from his week 3 opponent. So the animosity is getting up there, Alex. And I think it's a dangerous time in the league because those 0-2 guys are panicking a little bit. Even if they don't have to, you do have to get those wheels spinning. And this chatter is not helping anything.
Yeah, it creates a stressful situation because you think about like the ripple effect of a trade. The last thing you want to do is find yourself in a situation like Bobby and I did, at least for me, like 2 or 3 years ago, where I traded for Dalvin Cook and then he tore his ACL the next week. So it's like you think about how that type of thing could happen to you, and then you basically lose like a good player for nothing. So yeah, it's hard. It's hard. People are possessive with their players. Like I for one, the way I'm thinking of it right now is make sense for me to trade a running back, any one of the three, really, depending on what I could get back. But I'm in a position where I don't necessarily want to help out anyone else in the league that needs a running back, Warren.
Right.
So, so there's that side of it
What?
too. It's like I might be able to make my team better, but if I'm helping out this other team, is it worth doing? That,
Yeah.
you know, is this player going to beat me in week 13 or knock me out of the playoffs or something like that?
Yeah.
You got to think about it down the road, which is hard and creates some tense situations.
No, it's game theory 101. You know, it's a situation. We had a trade last year, Alex, that I think was pretty even down the middle, but then you add on, Dave, you've benefited from this man this year, Tyler Lockett, putting together these boom weeks that are week winners. And I had a feeling that he was going to be a league winner last year, or a week winner, I should say, not a league winner, but he's looking like a league winner this year, Dave. Just go with the GM chatter. I want to go into your mind, thought process on drafting Tyler Lockett, because we were looking in the 4th round, added James Robinson. You had a situation where you took him at pick number 40, and you had Thielen, Josh Jacobs, Julio, Deontay Johnson, Mahomes right there. What latched you on to Tyler Lockett? Because it's looking like an unbelievably great move right now.
Yeah, you know, I like the new offense in Seattle. I thought he would benefit from that, to be honest. Adam Thielen looking like a good pick this year. I was down on him, just thought the offense was going to take a step back. I thought Justin Jefferson was going to be that guy. Clearly not. Patrick Mahomes, even though he fell very late, I just don't take a quarterback that early, even if it is Patrick Mahomes. But I'll be honest, Tyler Lockett's much better than I thought he would be through 2 weeks, as I'm sure Alex knows, and I'm worried about. He could have a week, you know, next week where he has 0 to 3 points, and I wouldn't be surprised. But if he's going to keep catching balls, you know, 50 plus yards down the field, you're right. He could be that Stephon Diggs of this year.
Yeah, and it's right in that same realm that you took Diggs. You got a knack for it, man. And I think right before we get into that, the quick hit matchup segment to end the show, I want to get into a segment called Help is on the Way. This is the IR segment that we have where you look at a few teams that have that IR spot, and who are the teams that you're seeing when you look at that IR spot, that stash, and saying, man, if he can come back and if this team is still on the hunt, this could make a huge difference. I think, Alex, when you look at your squad, it's Jerry Jeudy. If he can come back in these next few weeks and produce the way he did week 1 before that injury, there you go. Your wide receiver need might go to the wayside. Michael Gallup, kind of the same way. But just if you take a look across the league, who is a team that, you know, could really make some waves if this guy comes back and really is back to the old self?
Yeah, I think the pretty clear one is Ra's al Ghul with that Michael Thomas pick in like the 7th or 8th round.
Yeah, he's a keeper.
You know, we know Raz is exploiting the COVID IR spot, which I don't appreciate. We all know that's not what that spot was designed for. You know, if I were commissioner this year, I would have ruled against that. I want that on the record, because if he's on PUP anyway and he's not playing, what does it matter that he got COVID? You know what I mean? He gets an extra roster spot because of that. Didn't end up benefiting from it, but just wanted to get that out there. But for Michael Thomas, I guess, you know, think about it like if he comes back, it'll probably be a little bit different than when he was with Drew Brees. But if he's even, you know, 75% of that, that's a great 7th, 8th round pick. So we'll see when he comes back. That surgery he had was pretty late in the summer. It might not be exactly when he can come off that PUP list, but I would say if Bob can plug him into his lineup instead of that bum Kenny Galladay, his team will be looking a lot better in the long run.
That's for sure. Dave, do you have any? Because there are a few. I think mine, just real quick. I know we talked about the shenanigans that go on, pun intended, in San Francisco, but I really liked the pickup that Pat Man Jones made with Jeff Wilson, because that was a guy that last year made some waves each week, really putting a solid performance together last year. And if he comes back and is healthy, I mean, that running back room is open and ready for the taking, it looks like. So I think that's definitely my pick. Now, the big question is for both these guys, you need to stay in the hunt. I think Bob at one keeps buying himself some time, and Patman Jones, this is the week to buy himself some time. So if he can buy time and have that running back stable to be able to of, like Alex said in the opening of the show, that's a team that we really need to put on as a marker to be concerned about.
No, I agree with that. It's tough. I will add that Wilson's on the PUP, so probably not back till midway through the season. Who knows what the Niners running back room will look like at that point? But I totally agree. Even if he's just a trade chip, that's a great piece, great pickup by Patman. My pick is going to be, we'll go back to our dear friend Moist Tellett with Odell Beckham potentially coming off the IR this week. Obviously, Jarvis Landry with the knee injury, he's going to be out a while. Thoughts and prayers to him and to the Dark Knights. But if he could come back, be that guy, maybe even half that guy used to be, still the number one wide receiver for sure on the Browns. Hopefully Baker's not injured. That would be huge for Chris, given his wide receiver situation.
Absolutely. There are a few, and I think that IR spot is something to monitor at all times for next year, and we'll see. But for right now, it's being used, and it's being used properly. There's some savvy guys on these IR spots. I'd even point out someone like Tariq Cohen for the Dark Knights. You just don't know what he can do in a Justin Fields offense or an Andy Dalton offense, but it's looking like Justin Fields. And if he can come back and off that ACL issue, then there could be some good things brewing.
Yeah, Warren, can I have a late yikes entry here? I'd like to give you a big yikes because the Dark Knights dropped Tariq Cohen early last week. Some of us did our preparation for this podcast. Others are the voice and soul of the podcast. But my yikes is now firmly on your shoulders.
So as I predicted, you took the yikes off of yourself to give to me.
Hey man, I atoned. Yom Kippur.
It's a magical
thing.
Listen, my apologies to the Dark Knights, and my apologies most importantly to my co-hosts. That's my fault. Let's just move on. And quick hits right before we go, because I think we're getting the game of the week written up by Jack Bissell tonight. Mm-hmm. Great. Good for
Treasurer Jack Bissell.
Week. And here comes Treble, ready to roll. Now, if you look at the matchups this week, Dave, you and I are about to hit the slopes together and see what happens. It's going to be a hell of a game. But if you look into week 3, for me, all eyes are on Patman Jones, Chafe Gentlemen. We've hit them constantly, and I'll make it real quick, but good Lord, this is a do or die spot for the both of them. Even if it's not, it's going to feel like it. And it's a matchup that's going to go to Monday Night Football as well, with Zeke on Monday night. And Pat has been beaten brutally 2 Monday nights in a row. Can he make it a third, or can he stave off that horrible stink of losing on Monday nights? Because Lord knows I've been hit by it. We've all been hit by it. It's just a brutal hit. Go into that Tuesday when the work week really starts, because everyone knows on Mondays, you just really focus on waiting for Monday Night Football. But so starting the work week on Tuesdays are always really brutal when you start off with an L. So that's mine. Alex, do you have a matchup you're keeping your eyes on besides yourself?
Yeah, well, to your point, I think that's an interesting point about the Monday Night Football. Like, when you lose a Monday night game, it's different when you can get over it on Sunday in a normal game. You know what I mean? Put it behind you. You wake up Monday, you're like, all right, I'm going to start looking towards next week. Who can I pick up? Yep. But Monday it lingers, and then your whole week feels like it's off. That's an interesting point that I never thought about, but I certainly feel that. Yeah. For my matchup, let's see here. I mean, looking at the projections, I don't know if Yahoo is doing something different or if teams are just better, but they all seem very, very highly projected. I mean, I'll touch on your guys' game since I'm a natural party here. I think the margin of victory there is, I have to fact check it, but the projections, that's probably the smallest. We've got a 50-50 split in terms of chances to win. That's a 0.4 difference in projections. Both teams, I think, have these explosive guys and then sort of, high floor players to match. So this should be a good one. I would probably pick this as game of the week if I were Bissell, but I'm not. Maybe we'll get some breaking news and he'll post it in the next couple minutes here. That would be fun. But
that would be phenomenal. That would be phenomenal.
Yeah, I think this will be a good one. Also going to go down to Monday night with Cooper if he plays. I guess he's questionable,
right.
but I think that'll be a big matchup, David, with the highest point total in the league. If he jumps to 2-1, all three of the top teams lose. He's comfortably in that at the top of the table. So that's the matchup that catches my eye the most.
No, it's an amazing parallel because just last year I lost on an Amari Cooper touchdown to Dave late in the game.
Mm-hmm.
Everything was
right from Andy Dalton, no less.
Of all people. So there is some poetic justice in play potentially for that matchup. But Dave, what do you got for yours? You're looking really, when you look at it, you're looking at those 1-1 matchups that you talked about. So this is a perfect way to end that show.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I wasn't going to go with one of the 1-1 matchups, but I can. One note on our matchup, just interesting tidbit, especially as Pats fans, see if Darrell Henderson plays or not. Warren obviously has Sony Michel, so that'll be an interesting thing to keep your eye on.
Right.
I'll go with what I was going to do quickly, and then I'll go with my favorite 1-1 matchup.
Perfect.
I was going to go, to Alex's point, I'm a great third party, to Alex and Nico's game. I think you touched on this earlier. Obviously, Al is 2-0, Nico's 0-2. 3-0 start for OB is just an early stranglehold on a playoff spot, and Nico is seemingly a perennial playoff contender. If he goes to 0-3, then this quote that I have directly from owner and CEO of the Dark Knights would be very fortuitous, or not fortuitous for him, from Nico. The Dark Knights might be a non-factor this year. That spells pessimism.
Wow.
And that's coming from, obviously, reigning champion, the Dark Knights. Now, down to a 1-1 matchup that I have my eyes on, and that is Moist Towlett versus the Floppy Knockers. Al, you nailed it. The projections from Yahoo are rather high, but I think they've been low for years, and they're probably more realistic now. There's a slight favor in Tom's neck of the woods here. It's about 4 points. But you look at the teams, and if Dalvin plays, these are teams that are very evenly matched. They have actually very similar lineup constructions, in my opinion. And that's the one I have my eyes on. I can't say who I'm rooting for. I love both those guys. But a 1-2 start versus a 2-1 start is a big difference for these teams.
That's for sure. No, it's a fantastic way, Dave, to finish off the podcast. I think we're back. We're happy to be back, and we'll be back at you soon. But for Alex, for David, this is Warren signing off. Good luck, guys. Good luck on the waiver wire. We'll see. It doesn't look very fruitful. Maybe that's because of IR slots. Who knows? But either way, it's been a pleasure, gentlemen. See you guys this time next week on the ShadowCast.
Thank you, boys.